Americans. Oh, ugly Americans.
Hi, good morning. This is CJ Holmes, independent real estate broker, founder of Homeowners for Justice, where we discuss the news, we comment on it, we look for what is going on, how we can change the argument, the arguments that are working, the ones that aren't, what we can do to help people stop foreclosures and keep their homes. That is the point. We've got to make this happen, and it's not been happening yet. So you see from the overview this morning, the agenda, I want to talk about what's going on as far as the Department of Justice and what Eric Holder is saying about big bank prosecution. We're going to review an analysis I was sent about the clerks. This would be the recorders, clerks, MERS lawsuits, how their arguments are faring in court, what's working, what might not be working. And then what's happening in Washington. Another foreclosure trustee is having a lawsuit against them, and we want to really figure out what is getting the Washington Supreme Court to vote for the people to judge in their favor instead of the banks and the foreclosure trustee mills, because maybe every other state in the union can start copying these arguments and using them in their court system. And then someone sent me some information. This is a devastated market, Vallejo, the city of Vallejo in Solano County. So we'll watch that news article, and then I want to talk about what's happening in real estate. You need to see the numbers the way I look at the numbers. I'm a broker. I represent people in transactions. And since 2008, I've been counting the numbers, and it's all by the numbers. How many foreclosures, how many short sales, how many homes for sale, how many buyers, and as the buyer demand goes up and down, this is what affects prices. So I want to talk about that so you have a little better understanding of the dangers as I perceive them. But before we do that, I really want to solicit for tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be our next update Friday, and I would really love every one of you, tell us your story. Any successes you've had, any failures, what have you tried that just hasn't worked? You're just getting run over by a train, feels like. Share that with us, because maybe someone will hear that and have some idea. Some way, if we share together what is going on in our lives, we have a much greater chance of making a difference for each other. So any actions, I've already solicited 3 or 4 people, asking them if they'll share tomorrow. I don't know if they will. Hopefully they will. If you want to share, just please send me an email. Go to hofj.org, our website. You can send me a website link or an email link or whatever you want. Just contact us, let us know. We'll get you on the update list. Thanks. Appreciate it, because this is the key to us. We need to be sharing with each other what is going on. So let's start by where the federal government is. And this is, the fact is, the realities behind big bank prosecution. We all know, if you watched my live stream on Monday, I played the 1-minute video of Eric Holder. He happens to be the Attorney General of the United States, actually saying, basically, banks are too big to prosecute. We don't dare do that. And this is an article that discusses, are they too big to jail? If there's any doubt, we know that at least he thinks they're too big to jail. I've already seen some petitions running around the internet saying, okay, let's tell them what we think, because we don't think the banks are too big to fail or too big to jail. And they should be jailed and fail. And you'll know that this is the sentiment of the people. Remember the video we saw a couple of days ago over in England, where 87% of the people said bailing out the banks was a bad idea. And yet all of the legislators, except 2 or 3, thought it was the thing to do. We're having this disconnect in this country. I think there's this disconnect probably everywhere in the planet. We need to somehow, and that's the kicker, how do we get this disconnect connected? How do we get prosecutions done? And so he's saying And of course, Geithner says, this article, I'm just scrolling down so you can just glance at it real quickly. At a minimum, Mr. Holder's comments are embarrassingly at odds with the Obama administration's view that they fixed too big to fail with Dodd-Frank. No, they didn't. That's the trouble. They didn't. More regulation isn't going to fix it. And Geithner, Timothy Geithner, who said the reforms will end too big to fail. They just say what they want to say, and it's not connected to reality. So this is something we have to face. This is why people will say, oh, have an article written, or, do a petition to Eric Holder. And I'm saying, I don't think that's going to make a difference. I really don't. That's why I'm pushing, let's print up the fraud, and let's just publicize it everywhere. What else can we do? If you have an idea, please tell us. We're all ears. We want to hear what you have to say. Now, I want to continue with looking at some of the arguments that are being used by the clerks. These are recorders' offices, the clerks' MERS lawsuits. I briefly have already highlighted this, and I've uploaded it to my website under the MERS mess. So you can look at this yourself, but I wanted to briefly highlight, this is an overview written by Dustin Zacks, who is basically just telling us what is going on, the kinds of arguments the recorders are using, the kinds of decisions that are coming down in courts in general. And so what he's talking about is, of course, first, MERS is now on millions of home loans. And if you've listened to any of these live streams, you know that our view is basically pretty much MERS is a smokescreen, a shell, it's a database under which banks can manipulate the loans and the ownership of the loans and notes any way they like, and with impunity. Nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody can stop them. Nobody can get that information. And the homeowners are, obviously very upset about that, because all of a sudden MERS forecloses and then some strange entity is, quote, the owner of your note. And so, however, in courts, even though the homeowners have been challenging this in foreclosure litigation, most jurisdictions have recognized that MERS has an ability to foreclose on behalf of the beneficial owner of the loan. And now MERS is getting new challenges. They're coming from the clerks. Remember, we talk about Nancy Becker from Pennsylvania, and her lawsuit is still standing. Most of these lawsuits don't make it past the motion to dismiss. MERS motions to dismiss, and most of them are thrown out. But these are the kinds of claims that are being made. First, one of the claims they're listing here first is that state laws require all assignments to be recorded. Now, unfortunately, regardless of that, courts have not been especially receptive to this argument, even in the face of statutory language. That means our laws that were passed by our legislature, against which you and I would have to be held liable. But the courts are saying, even in face of that, which appears to be to mandate recording transfers of interest, the courts aren't really supporting this claim. And that's troubling. That's really troubling when our laws are basically appearing to mandate this, and the clerks file a claim that way in the lawsuit and the court doesn't uphold it. That is troubling. Here's another claim. MERS uses deceptive language, and I call this the rabbit and the tiger. MERS says in the deeds of trust and the mortgages, they will say we're a nominee for the beneficiary. Oh, by the way, we're the beneficiary. In other words, whatever we want to be, we can be. I can be a rabbit, I'm going to be a tiger at the same time. Whichever thing I need to be right then, I'm going to be, oops, rabbit, oops, tiger. And unfortunately, many courts have ruled that MERS has standing regardless of whether they're a true or traditional mortgagee. So the courts have been going along with this, what I would call a deceptive practice. But obviously, it doesn't work in litigation. There's some other claims. 3, 4, and 5, unjust enrichment, MERS is evil, they caused the crisis. Right down here is a novel argument, because MERS facilitated being able to securitize these loans, because without MERS it would have been just virtually impossible to have recorded all of these transfers in the recorder's offices fast enough, my words, to actually do what they were doing. It's a novel argument, but it's not really holding much water in courts, unfortunately. There's other private attorney actions, private general attorney, and those aren't holding because the actions that are being brought are typically not meeting the criteria of such actions. Here's the court's response. Overall, the revenge of the clerks, these court lawsuits and filings, have been hampered by most courts' failure to allow the lawsuits to progress past the motion to dismiss. Remember one of them lawsuits was the clerks have the state law says that all of the assignments have to be recorded. And so where the courts have found a duty to record, when they actually say, okay, the law says that, they have generally ruled that that duty doesn't give a cause of action to the clerk, but to the property owners. So here's an idea. Does that mean that property owners in those states, those counties where those clerks have used that argument and gotten that opinion, maybe that's the class action for those owners? So think about that. I know that I've got some really smart legal minds that listen to me occasionally, so help us out. Let's pursue that. I'm trying to come up with some other ideas of things that we can do. They've generally held, let's see, where are we here again? Oh, yes, and then of course the courts hold that the recording is merely a ministerial act, which is what every recorder in California tells us. I can't do anything. I can't check to see if the paperwork's right. I can't look at the document if it's filled out correctly. My duty is to record it. I'm just a vessel, to quote one recorder in my county. When it comes in, I stamp it and it's recorded. That is my job. That is my job. And so that belies the lawsuits that some of these clerk recorders are filing. And again, they talk about if MERS did owe a duty to record truthful documents, that's not the duty of the clerk, the recorder, the registrar, to decide. The law does not give that office a duty to determine if the document is false or not. So I believe that what it sounds like to me, summarize, the clerks are using lawsuit pleas, items to sue under, that they may not be the best party to sue for. So let's think this through and come up with what else might work, and then let's suggest it to our local elected officials. And then, simply put, courts have not been persuaded to rule for clerks based upon the fact that MERS may produce some negative issues. That is not the point. Now, this writer concludes, okay, I've written a really skeptical article. He says, even though this article has taken a relatively skeptical and pessimistic view of these anti-MERS lawsuits, banks and their advocates must remain wary of these seemingly unending matters, just as the tobacco lawsuits, really good example, were initially met with skepticism and ridicule. One large win was all it took to turn regular routes into an industry-changing victory. And that's why that's why we have to keep working on this. One major decision for the people can make a huge difference. It's worth fighting for. We have to do this every day. And I know we're going to get slapped down, and I know people lose their homes, and I know it's wrong, and it just kills me, but we can't lose faith, and we can't lose our effort and energy. It says, similarly, one pro-clerk verdict could spur even more lawsuits. You and I know this is going to happen. We're just watching Nancy Becker over there with bated breath because they threw out her conspiracy, but they kept the other claims that MERS had to record every assignment, had to correct all the records. and had to pay all the fees to do so. So this is why it's still worth fighting for against MERS, still worth coming up with whatever we can do. Now, back to, yes, a foreclosure trustee that broke consumer law. Now, this is in Washington State. Fascinating that Washington is a couple of years ahead of us easily. They've already, by the way, booted out Recon Trust. Recon Trust cannot foreclose in Washington State. Here, they're foreclosing with impunity. They're just thousands and thousands of homes that they've already foreclosed, and they just continue to foreclose, even though it's all illegal. All the paperwork is illegal and fraudulent and fake. But let's look at what the Supreme Court ruled in this particular case. And this court, this ruling was for the people, then appealed against the people. Now it's back for the people against the bank and against Quality Loan Service. I want to read this to you. It's really worth paying attention, because here again, maybe there's some other laws, statutes, that lawsuits in California could be based on in the correct courts. Obviously, this is a state court thing that would give owners a better win. So in the Supreme Court last Thursday in Washington, ruled against Quality Loan Service, saying it could not act merely as an agent for lenders. I want to just put an aside here. Several others, and I have been sort of batting this idea around. Can the trustee be the agent for the beneficiary? And some sources are saying it has to be neutral, and other sources are saying no, it doesn't. So this is a battle here in this state. We're discussing this right now with looking at statutes and laws, and maybe there's a consumer protection law that this crosses the line with. You know, it's just like suing under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act instead of some other kind of foreclosure defense ruling or law. So the state Supreme Court on Thursday ruled that one of the West Coast major players, their major Quality Loan Service, is a major foreclosure trustee mill. They violated the state consumer protection law. Guess what they did? They falsely notarized legal documents. I tell you, the false notarization should have some clout to it. If there's anything that the people can hang their hat on, and that's false notaries. It's the building block of fraud, and this is the whole point. They falsely notarized a legal document, happened to be a notice of sale. So this court, the Supreme Court, overturned the appeals court to issue an injunction, which is what we want, against foreclosure trustee Quality Loan Service. Quality has demonstrated little understanding or regard for Washington law. What a shock. Are you kidding me? These foreclosure trustee mills just stomp all over everybody's laws. We just have to somehow get it so that they can't keep stomping. It's like a bully. They're just bullies, and they're going to just bully everybody until we stop them. So, foreclosure, here's a statement. The court wrote in Washington that foreclosure trustees are not simply agents for the lender. Let's see if we can't get that to work in every other state. I don't care which state you're in when you're watching this. Go to your statutes. Go to everybody you know. Go to the attorneys. Ask them about the law, consumer protection law in your state that would say that foreclosure trustees cannot be just agents for the lender, because as an agent for the lender, they're just going to stomp all over you. The power to sell another person's property, often the family home itself, is a tremendous power to vest in anyone's hands. This is the court opinion. The law requires that trustee to be even-handed to both sides and to strictly follow the law. I'm desperate for someone to help me find the statutes for this so that we can get this out to everybody, the attorneys, the people, the judges. If we can find that kind of law and statute in particularly in California, that's where I'm at, every other state, because this would negate all of Recon Trust's notice of defaults, because I've already made a big issue about that. Notice of defaults from Recon Trust always are filled out as Recon Trust NA as agent of the beneficiary. And in their notice of default documents, they always state that the beneficiary was MERS, regardless of what else is recorded on that property. I can't believe that's legal. I'm asking for opinions. But nevertheless, in 2008, a nonprofit group, Puget Sound Guardians, sued Washington Mutual and Quality Loan for allegedly violating consumer protection law. And of course, they just take the homes of the weak, widows and children and powerless. It's just galling. So they sold her home at a foreclosure auction for $1 more than the $83,087 she owed, stripping her of $150,000 in equity. So then, of course, the new people that bought it, they immediately flipped it and made the money. This is just an egregious situation. It's just insult to injury. So, of course, they sued WAMU about $75,000 at the time she developed dementia. Poor lady. The cost of her medical care ate up the funds. She died in 2008. But Quality falsely notarized the date on the notice of trustee's sale, and apparently trained its notaries to do this regularly from 2004 to 2007. How they found that out, I'd love to know that. Had the notice of sale been correctly dated, the foreclosure auction would have been delayed at least a week. A signed notarization is the ultimate assurance upon which the whole world is entitled to rely that the proper person signed a document on the stated day and place. Absolutely. And false notarization is bearing false witness. It's completely destructive of a society based on law and order. So, of course, we all know this. The executive director of the nonprofit said her agency made repeated requests to WAMU and Quality to delay the sale. Of course they did. This is happening all the time, all over the place, completely unfairly. But Quality had a written agreement with WAMU that forbade it from postponing a sale without the bank's approval. How they found that out, I'd love to know that. An appeals court in 2011 rejected the jury's verdict against Quality, ruled there wasn't sufficient evidence to show they had violated that consumer protection law. And it doesn't say here which one that is. So it'd be great. Let's delve into this and find out. As a result, it was not liable for attorney's fees. In a statement Thursday, of course, Quality said that we've dedicated significant resources to ensure non-judicial foreclosures are processed to the highest standards of legal compliance while respecting and focusing on compassionate treatment of all borrowers during their difficult time. I beg to differ. I'm sorry. That is just basically a statement that is not based on probably hardly anything that they've ever done. Most of the time, this is not the treatment people get. The senior attorney for the Northwest Justice Project, who represented Puget Sound Guardians, said the court's ruling sent a strong message to all foreclosure trustees. They have to treat both banks and borrowers in good faith. And if they don't treat them in good faith, then they're going to be held liable for damages. So let's do what we can to make that happen here in California. So I'm begging you, help me research this. You guys will have more time than I probably will to focus in on this. There's so many more people that understand this so much better than I do. I'm just a voice. I'm just sharing what we find and trying to motivate people to step up and fight back because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Now we've got Washington State stopping Quality Loan Service. We can do this in California. We can get this. Let's figure out how. Now, what I'd like to do next is talk about the real estate. I've been sent some information, and then I've done it prompted me to count the numbers again, like I told you, because what is actually happening, and this is why it is a crisis. Somebody said something that evidently our legislators don't think this is a crisis. An article I read. Somebody said, well, if this had been viewed as a crisis, then they might have been, bailed out the homeowners. But this wasn't viewed as a crisis. This is just foreclosures. The banks were in crisis mode, but not owners. And so what we need to do, that tells me that if we can somehow get the understanding that this foreclosure is a crisis, then maybe we'll get more ears at the elected level of our officials, both state and federal. So before we go into the little news article, the news article talks about the Gallup poll. So I want to show you these stats. And of course, Gallup is always a little bit behind. So this was done in 2012, just about the middle of 2012. So it's about 9 months behind. And the scary part, April, the scary part about these numbers, and I'm going to explain to you, and this is why, this is another reason we can use this scary information to start pushing the fact out that this is a crisis. This is a crisis. It's a crisis in the loss of the American dream. It's a crisis in home ownership for people. It's a crisis in the country, and of course it's ruined the economy. But nevertheless, let's look at some of these charts. This is the U.S. home ownership chart. Right as of last year in April, only 62% owned a home. Well, and that's easily explained because so many people lost in foreclosure or short sale. You got to remember that when an owner loses the property to a foreclosure or a short sale, they can't qualify for a loan to buy another home for 3 years. So effectively, what this has done is that as a nation, the rules at the federal level, without bailing out homeowners and not allowing them to refinance out of high interest loans because the value had dropped, there's a whole bunch of things going on, but in essence, what it does is locks people in to an upside down loan, shoves them out of the house, and then when they're out of the house and they said, "Now, where am I going to live?" They want to buy another place, but they can't. And so it has shrunk the buyer pool. All the people that would normally, when they sell a house, they'd go buy another one. Normally, sellers buy. Either they buy up or they buy down. You know, they have a house, it's increased in equity, they sell, they buy another house, around and around until they retire, they sell out, they buy something inexpensive, single level, that they can live on the equity difference. That's a classic real estate engine in this country everywhere. This works everywhere at every price point. The fact is, once you shove these people out of their homes and you don't let them buy, you've just got thousands. Now we've got millions of people sitting over here on the sidelines, can't buy a house. And so the banks, I've often talked about this as musical chairs. You have a musical chairs game, and you know there's 100 chairs and there's 101 people running around, okay, and everyone's trying to scramble to get a chair. Well, what the banks have been doing is just pulling the people out of the game. So now when you have 100 chairs and 80 people, well, prices fall. There's just way too much demand. So as they shove buyers out, they've been pulling out the chairs. So you've got this musical game shrinking, 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 as the banks are trying to manipulate the market, but they won't let these people buy. They're deadbeats now, even though it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. The market fell. They're upside down. They have to sell. They can't sell except short. Now they're deadbeat. And so they shove these people out at no fault of their own. So they're pulling the chairs out. And this is why you've got millions of people looking to rent and millions of vacant foreclosures, while we have a little small game going on down here. And of course, cash is coming in now and buying. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So what's happened is home ownership has plummeted. This is not a good sign. Not a good sign. Now, record low, 53% of Americans have said their home values have increased. Well, possibly in 2012, values started to climb a little bit, but it's a no-brainer when you see that the people that said their home is worth more than they paid for it is declining, and the people that said, nope, my home is not worth more than I paid for it is increasing. I mean, right now, I've already talked about we have at least 2 million loans upside down in California. And it's the upside downness of these loans that feeds the foreclosure and short sale pipeline. And then down here, most Americans say now is still a good time to buy. 70% are saying it's a good time. That was last year, and 28% are saying it's not a good time. Remember, prices were going up, inventory was shrinking, prices are climbing, so more people are feeling more positive about their home, even if they're upside down. But because there's so many chairs over here, there's so many vacant foreclosures, you mark my words, the banks can change this any time they want. This is the scariest thing about inventory. It's all up to the banks to decide, well, should we just list these now? And they just list hundreds of homes. They will collapse the prices. That's the scary thing. We have no control over that. And maybe there's some way we can get some control. If you have any ideas about that, you let me know. More Americans expect local home prices to increase than decrease. Well, the jury's out on that one, because as of last year in April, only 33% thought the home prices would increase and 23% thought it would decrease. So people don't know. People don't know. And like I talk about appraisers and valuations, property valuations, appraisers and the whole concept of an appraisal is looking at the market backwards. You're backing into the future and you're looking backwards at what the sales were, not turning around looking at what's going to affect future sales. So as they look backwards, how do they know they're not going to fall off the cliff? And that's the dilemma of the appraisal, of looking at past market action to try to predict the future. You have to look at future things that are going to impact the market, like home loans. Who's going to make loans? And this is becoming a real problem. Nobody wants to make loans anymore. Have you noticed? Fannie, Freddie, FHA. It's a majority of the market now is the government. The banks are saying, "Whoa, I'm out of here. I don't want to make a loan anymore," and that's causing fewer buyers to qualify. So now we have even more trouble. Listen to what is happening in Vallejo, and I want to point out to those of you that may not know, Vallejo in Solano County, California, has been another epicenter of foreclosure devastation. They've had a drop in value from like the 465 down to 65. It's just been horrific. And the fact of the matter is, they're just still foreclosing. They're still taking homes. They're not listing them. You're going to see here pretty quick. And it's really shoved most of the people out of the market. So who can buy? That does become the question. Sort of like San Bernardino and Riverside counties, even LA, they've been so devastated with foreclosures. So let's listen to what's going on in Vallejo. This is a fascinating little thing.
It's the Toyota Tahoe Report from Squaw Valley, brought to you by your Northern California Toyota dealers. Conditions are fantastic with fresh powder and more on the way. If you're heading to the slopes, first check out a new 4x4 at your Toyota dealer so you can say, "Bring on the powder." Toyota Plus Squaw. Right. Go bigger.
Here we go.
Vallejo tonight, city leaders took a major step to combat the blight and crime that has come hand in hand with the foreclosure crisis. An ordinance aimed squarely at the banks. ABC 7 News reporter Alan Wong is live in Vallejo at City Hall there to explain what just changed. Alan?
Well, Dan, vacant foreclosed homes have been the source of an explosion of crime-related problems in this city, which doesn't have the money or the manpower to control it. But now this city has a way to make these property owners accountable. The city of Vallejo says police have responded to this foreclosed home numerous times. Diane Merrick lives across the street.
So you believe there was prostitution going on in there?
It was extremely obvious.
No one answered the door tonight, but police say they've removed squatters here at least 5 times. Neighbors say for the past year, a woman keeps breaking in and illegally renting the rooms out.
So she's acting like the landlord?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She thinks that's her place.
The city says it's dealing with at least 6 other situations just like this. Merrick says she and a neighbor sued the bank which owns this foreclosed home but the cases were dismissed both times.
The health department's been in there, the building inspector's been in there, everybody's been in there. But due to the laws being what they are, it's a long, difficult process.
But the passing of a new ordinance tonight forces the banks to register their foreclosed homes and maintain them, or face fines and penalties.
And eventually we will abate the nuisances and then lien the property.
Vallejo's code enforcement manager says the ordinance empowers the city, which has more than 1,000 foreclosed homes, with nearly half receiving nuisance complaints.
We've had abandoned properties burned down by squatters. We've had people break into the properties and rip out all the copper, all the fixtures.
This ordinance is already being enforced in Benicia, Fairfield, and Oakland. It takes a lot of weight off the shoulders of this city's 3 code enforcement officers, and it gives more incentive to these banks to sell off these homes a lot quicker.
Did you hear that? They have 1,000 vacant foreclosures. That prompted me to start. This is just a city. This is one city. So it prompted me to do some numbers, and I wanted to show you what I've done. This is what I mean when I say I'm counting the numbers, and hopefully you can see them. I will upload them onto the website. As of March 13, 2013, 1,000 vacant foreclosures in Vallejo. Now this is the numbers for the Vallejo home market. And what I've done here, I've gone back to 2006 and then 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I've prorated the first 2 months for 2013. I've also given you the exact numbers of January and February, 2 months in, this is just Vallejo, and how many active listings is just homes and condos in Vallejo, and how many they have pending. And then I've categorized these by what types of listings are they, or sales are they. Were they bank-owned, REO? Were they short sales, or were they something else? You know, a standard sale or a probate sale or some other, what we would typically term as a normal sale. And then what are the total number of home sales in this one city for these years? So you'll notice, oh, down here I've added how many were purchased with cash, all cash buyers, and what percentage of the total amount is that cash buyer number. Then of course down here, these are the prices. This is the minimum price, this is the average price, the median price, and median is a statistical number that means half the property sales were above and half were below. It's just the median, it's not an average. And you'll note that a lot of times there's some significant variance with the median and the average. And then what's the high price? So if you start in 06, which was pretty much one of the last years of what we would call the bubble, as prices were going up, although they had started to level off even in 06. There were only 242 homes all year that were sold that were bank-owned, only 69 short sales, and over 2,000 normal sales. Of that, only 5% was cash. This is in Vallejo. Now in 2008, when we really started to feel the foreclosure pressure, and you'll note that the minimum price was $120,000 in 06. 2 years later, the minimum was $27,000. Okay, now that is called a collapse. It just collapses. And you'll note that the average fell in half. It fell 50% to start with. From 07, when all the people couldn't pay and the loans blew up and they all got shoved out of their houses and the banks took them back in foreclosure, that was in 07, then in 08 they started dumping them on the market, and they just started dumping them. They just list. And of course none of those people could buy, so boom, prices started falling. And you'll note that the median fell in half too, and of course the high end just really collapsed. Now, as you look through the years, you'll note that bank-owned sales are a big percentage. Up until 2012, it was hanging at least 1 to 2,000 per year. Now, in 2012, see, the banks stopped listing their REOs. Now look what they've done so far. On a prorated basis of what they've done January and February on the sales of bank-owned properties, which is only 55 for 2 months, it's fallen again in half. So they've got 1,000 vacant foreclosures, and they're listing 25, 30 a month. So we can speculate, which we often do, but we already know that one of the things is REOs to rentals. They want to sell these in bulk to somebody. They don't want to list them. And I think the banks have decided that at this point, remember, it's never their money. It wasn't their loss anyway. And the longer they hold them, the more they can bill the mortgage-backed security trustees. So holding them is actually, a profit-making business, other than these kinds of laws that come down saying, okay, now we're going to be able to sue you. Now you're going to have to, upkeep the property. You have to keep the vandals out. Chances are those costs will just be passed on to the mortgage-backed security, think our pension fund. So in the end, the people lose. We just always lose. But nevertheless, you look at the short sales. Have they increased and increased? Except not this year. They're starting to fall also. So if they're not selling short and they're not approving short sales, and Bank of America now has a policy that even if you've started a short sale, it used to be you could postpone the auction. It will no longer postpone the auction. The foreclosure will just continue normally. The only thing that we have by law that must postpone an auction is the loan modification. So a lot of people are applying for loan modifications with that very thought in mind. It might be a delay stall tactic that you could use. You could share with others to use, because short sales are not going to be as productive in postponing auctions as they used to be. And notice now it's falling down. And then these are the active sales. So those that are active, that have not gotten into escrow, right now there's only 81. Only 81 active homes for sale. 19 are bank-owned, 20 are short, and 42 are not. And see, bank and short used to be about 75 to 80% of Vallejo's, of Solano County's market, probably even more so in Vallejo. Tends to be centered, the crisis centered right there. And I've been looking at Solano County for years. And so now, look at these pendings. See how big pendings are? That's 255. That's just an abnormal number. That's because they're short. They're just filled with short sales. So it will be fascinating to see how many of those actually close. Because if Bank of America and others have decided, we're just going to foreclose, we're not going to, you can start a short sale and go for it, and then I'm going to just take it anyway. And of course, nobody gets paid. Everybody does all kinds of work. Nobody gets paid. The owner is banking on this, hoping he can get his half of, some monies to move, like cash for keys for owners. And then, boom, it's foreclosed. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. And then, of course, you can see down here, as we have the averages and the medians, they have climbed up in 2012, and because inventory is so tight right now, this is very, very tight. A normal market is about 3 to 4 months of inventory. So if you're down to, 2 weeks, and bidding wars, which is what we see pretty much throughout the Bay Area, particularly for properties priced below a certain price point, whatever that price point is for that area, because there's like an affordable price point in all these different counties, and that number varies, but the concept is the same. And so we see that the numbers have started to increase a little bit, but again, the problem is look at the cash buyers. Most of these properties are not being sold to first-time home buyers, or home buyers for that matter. Watch what cash has done. From 5% in 06, it's steadily climbed to now it's a prorated 51%. As you see, I did the actual numbers. Out of 200 sales so far in Vallejo this year, Jan and Feb, over half of them were all cash. Now, all cash is coming from all sources. It's coming from families who's either lost the home, or the kid lost the home, or a family member lost the home, and so the families are saying, they can't qualify, our cash is earning nothing in the bank, so we'll just buy the house and they can live there and it'll be an asset for the family. That's happening a fair amount. Also, what's happening is what we've talked about. The hedge funds are actually taking large chunks of money and buying gobs of homes, but I suspect that those cash purchases are not showing up here. I expect those cash purchases are going to show up here. So the foreclosures may eventually sort of disappear. They're not being listed. You can't find these houses to buy. But chances are the banks are going to say, "Oh, I got 200 in Vallejo. Do you want 50 of them?" I don't know. And I do believe that there may be some potential in here for us to stop the banks from selling to the in bulk to hedge funds. I'm not sure how, but I do know this. They need to either, if they're vacant, either put the former owners back in and let them own that property again at current market value, or they need to list them and provide loans for buyers. That's what would balance the market. You want restitution? Let the people that lost a home have a home back. There's some restitution, even if it's not the one they lost. Maybe they could have one of these. So these are just some ideas that I've had I wanted to share. I wanted you to look at the market the way I see the market, and I see the potential for the manipulation of the market. That's why I say things like, even to my clients, it's affordable, but you got to understand the banks own so much inventory they can do whatever they want. And people they want to be told the truth. They're going to make their own decision. But as long as they understand that, hey, the price could fall. Here's another truth. Look at this. These prices are down to where even if they fall a 10 or 20%, they fall 30 or 40,000, it's not going to really ruin it as a house to live in, as a house to use as a rental. Some people are actually able to buy another rental or two for their little portfolio. I call them small-time investors versus the hedge funds. And so even if the value fluctuates, from 184 back down to 155, it's not going to ruin those people that want to hold the house for a long term. It makes it very difficult for flip. Anyone who wants to buy, fix, get in, get out, make some money, it looks like in these markets right now, that's very, very difficult. Most investors are not able to do that. It is now a market in which rents in certain areas, like Vallejo, where prices have really come down, like the Central Valley, like down in Southern California, where you've got such low prices, but the demand is still there because 1,000 homes have been pulled out of the inventory. So all those people, where are they going to rent? They got to rent somewhere. They got to live somewhere. Some are under the bridge. That's a crime and a half. But the others are actually able to move into a rental. So there's some competition there. So rental prices have been rising, which makes when the house prices are dropping, the rents are increasing. That makes it a more interesting investment, even for a family, even for a family group or a small-time investor. Large investors, I swear, are not buying onesie-twosies. They're going to be going after this amount. So the fact of the matter is, our real estate has been completely manipulated. Equity has been lost by millions of people because of this crisis. It is a foreclosure crisis because that crisis has pushed so many people out of their homes, kept them out of home ownership, and is keeping them out of home ownership. So let's hammer that as a crisis, maybe we can get somebody to write articles about that. And as we shift, and hopefully that would shift public opinion into looking at really the devastation on the people, on the owners. Because even if you're current on your payment, and millions of people are current, they may not like their loan, but they're current, and they don't want to lose the house, they've still lost the equity. And so I hear from these people all the time, and they say, I want to refinance, but nobody will refinance me, even though it would make even better sense because my payments would be less. I could more easily afford them, and I would be down from my 6 3/4% down to my 3.5 or 4%. That's a significant, that's several $100s a month difference for any property priced over $100,000. And so those people are not being met. And this is the focus, some new ideas. I wanted to bring some fresh thought into how we might position the foreclosure crisis to shift the focus and the discussion and the myth of the deadbeat homeowner. It's all those people, they bought a home they couldn't afford, and the sooner we get all these done, the better, which is pretty much the mainstream media. We need to say, no, wait a minute, no. They actually could afford it. They were cheated into foreclosure by telling them they had a default. They've lost all of their down payments. Now they're booted out, and now they can't buy. How fair is that? How fair is that? It's not fair, and it hurts everybody. It hurts our nation. So just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for watching. I know it's about time we got to go, and I really appreciate it. So please, one more solicitation before we sign off today. Tomorrow is Update Friday. Please share with us your story. I want to hear about your successes. I want to hear about the failures. I'm going to share some anyway, even if you don't call and say how horrible it is, because people are being so cheated everywhere, and this is what drives those of us that really care. We care about others, and we care about how what happens to them happens to us, because it's just like that story in the Nazis. They came for those people. Well, I wasn't one of them, so I didn't fight back. If we don't fight back, they're going to come for us. You mark my words. So we want to hear about how they're coming for you, how you're fighting back, anything that's working. It might work for someone else, so please share it. And then the actions. We've got some real lead dogs coming down the pipe. They're really taking this to heart. I'm just so pleased and proud to even be associated with them. So it all matters to us. Thank you very much. This is CJ signing off for today. Talk to you tomorrow.